The rain was soaking through my jacket, but I didn't feel the cold. All I felt was the weight of the $200 bouquet in my hand and the sight of my wife, Elena, standing in the foyer of a house she supposedly didn't live in, wearing nothing but a silk robe I had never seen before. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that single moment turned my entire world into a pile of ash, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to when I still believed our love was the only thing that mattered. 12 years, that's how long Elena and I had been together. If you had asked anyone in our circle in Oak Creek, they would have told you we were the gold standard. I was a structural engineer, she was an aspiring interior designer, and we were that couple that still held hands while grocery shopping at the Sunday market. We had our rituals, like Friday nights at a little hole-in-the-wall Italian place called Victorio's. We always sat in the same creaky corner booth, sharing a bottle of cheap Chianti and talking about the house we were going to build one day. I called her Lainey, and she called me her anchor. 6 months ago, Elena came home glowing. She told me she'd landed a miracle gig. A high-end client, some tech billionaire named Marcus, who spent 9 months of the year in Singapore, needed a live-in house sitter for his estate in the hills. The pay was staggering, nearly $4,000 a week, just to ensure the property was maintained and the staff were doing their jobs. She told me this was our ticket out of our cramped apartment. "Just 6 months, Mark," she'd said, tucking a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. "We save every penny, and by next spring, we're breaking ground on our own place. Think of it as a short-term sacrifice for our forever." I hated the idea of her being away 4 nights a week, but I wanted her to be happy. I wanted that house for us. So I agreed. That should have been my first warning, the way she didn't even hesitate to pack her bags. But what came next was so much worse. The first few weeks were okay. We talked every night, though she'd always say the reception at the estate was spotty and she had to call me from the veranda. But then the small things started to shift. You know that feeling when you're looking at a familiar picture and suddenly realize one of the colors is just wrong? That's how it felt. It started with the client's rules. She told me Marcus was incredibly private and didn't allow visitors, not even me. Then there was the smell. When she'd come home on her days off, she didn't smell like her usual vanilla perfume. She smelled like expensive sandalwood and high-end tobacco, the kind of scent that clings to a person's skin after they've been in a confined space with someone else. When I asked about it, she laughed it off. "Oh, that's just the library," she said. "Marcus has this massive collection of vintage cigars. The smell is baked into the woodwork." If that was all I found, maybe I could have let it go. Maybe I would have remained the trusting, naive husband she thought I was. But then I checked the iPad. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I was looking for a digital level app for a project I was working on. I grabbed Elena's iPad, which she had accidentally left on the charging port in the kitchen. A notification banner slid across the top of the screen. It wasn't from a tech billionaire. It was a message from a contact saved only as Jay. "The wine is chilling. Don't be late, Rumi. I missed you today."
My heart did a slow, painful somersault in my chest. Rumi. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I knew I shouldn't look, but my hand acted on its own. I opened the message thread. There were no discussions about property management or staff schedules. Instead, I found a digital paper trail of a life I didn't recognize. There were photos of Elena in a modern, glass-walled kitchen I'd never seen, laughing while holding a glass of rosé. There were good-night texts sent at 2 a.m. on nights she told me she was already asleep. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a parallel existence. I checked the GPS history on the device. It was synced to her car. For the last 3 months, she hadn't been going to the estate in the hills. Every single time she went to work, she drove to a luxury condo complex in the Marina district, a place where the rent for a 2-bedroom started at $5,000 a month. I felt like the floor was tilting. I wanted to throw the iPad through the window. I wanted to scream until my lungs gave out. But a cold, hard resolve took over. I realized that if I confronted her now, she'd have a dozen excuses ready. She'd gaslight me, tell me Jay was just a gay friend or a coworker. I needed more. I needed to see it for myself. I spent the next 3 days acting completely normal. I cannot describe the Herculean effort it took to kiss her goodbye on Monday morning, to tell her to have a good week at the estate, while knowing she was driving straight into the arms of another man. She had no idea what was coming. I was the anchor, remember? And anchors stay tight. But this anchor was about to drop. Tuesday evening arrived. I told her I was working late at the firm, but instead, I went to a florist and bought the biggest, most expensive arrangement of lilies they had, her favorite. I added a box of Belgian chocolates. I wanted this to look like the ultimate romantic gesture. I wanted there to be no mistaking who the delivery was for. I drove to the Marina District. The address from the GPS led me to a sleek steel and glass tower overlooking the bay. I didn't go to the front desk. I waited outside until a food delivery driver arrived and I slipped in behind him. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, a rhythmic thumping that seemed to sync with the ticking of the elevator floor numbers. 12, 14, 16. Penthouse B. I stood in front of the door for a full minute, just breathing. I looked at the flowers. I looked at my wedding ring. Then I knocked. Not a frantic knock, but a steady, polite one, the kind a delivery man would give. "Who is it?" a man's voice called out. It was deep, confident, and entirely unfamiliar. "Delivery for Elena," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane in my stomach. I heard footsteps. The lock turned. The door swung open, and for a second, time simply stopped. The man was in his late 30s, wearing a navy silk robe bath. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a catalog, rugged, tanned, and looking very much at home. Behind him, the condo was a minimalist masterpiece, and there, sitting on a white leather sofa with a glass of wine in her hand, was my wife. The color didn't just leave Elena's face, it evaporated. She looked like a ghost that had just realized it was dead. Her glass tilted in her hand, red wine splashing onto the white rug, but she didn't even notice. "Mark," she whispered. The word sounded like it was being squeezed out of her. "I realized you forgot these," I said, stepping into the foyer. I held out the flowers to the man in the robe bath. He looked from the flowers to me, then back to Elena, his brow furrowing. "Elena, who is this?" he asked. His tone wasn't aggressive yet, just confused. "I'm her husband," I said, looking him dead in the eye. I felt a strange, cold calm. "And you must be Marcus? Or is it Julian?"
The man's expression shifted from confusion to a sharp, jagged realization. He stepped back, his hands going to the pockets of his robe. She told me you were her ex, that the divorce was finalized a year ago." I turned my gaze to Elena. She had finally stood up, her hands shaking so violently she had to set the wine glass on the coffee table. "Mark, please, it's not... I can explain." "Explain what, Lonnie?" I walked further into the room, taking in the details. My eyes landed on a framed photo on the mantel. It wasn't a photo of us. It was a photo of her and Julian on a beach. "Explain how the high-end client pays you in penthouse living? Explain how you're saving for our future by playing house with someone else." "I was going to tell you," she sobbed, the tears finally breaking through. She moved toward me, her hands reaching out, but I stepped back as if her touch would burn me. "It started as a job, I swear. He was a client, and then it just happened. I didn't know how to stop it. I thought if I could just get enough money, I could make everything right for us." "With his money?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that felt louder than a shout. "You were going to build our forever home with the proceeds of your affair? Did you think I was that pathetic? Or did you just think I was that stupid?" Julian cleared his throat, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "Look, man, I had no idea she was still married. She told me she was living in a studio while the paperwork cleared. She's been living here 4 days a week for months." I ignored him. I kept my eyes on Elena. I wanted to see the moment the last of her lies withered away. How much of it was real, Elena? Any of it? The Friday nights at Vittorio's? The plans for the house? Or was I just the safety net in case your billionaire didn't work out? "It was all real," she shrieked, her composure finally shattering into a million jagged pieces. She fell to her knees on that expensive white rug, the silk robe splaying out around her. "I love you, Mark. I just wanted a better life. I hated being poor. I hated waiting." "We weren't poor, Elena," I said, and for the first time, my voice cracked. "We were building something. But I guess you prefer a finished product over a foundation?" I took my wedding ring off. It felt lighter than I expected. I walked over to the coffee table and set it down next to her wine glass. "The lease on our apartment is up at the end of the month," I said, my voice now devoid of any emotion. "I've already moved my things. You can keep the savings. I don't want a single cent that touched this room." "Mark, wait, don't go," she cried, reaching for my leg.
I looked down at her, the woman I had adored, the woman I would have died for, and I felt nothing, just a vast, empty space where my heart used to be. I looked at Julian, who was standing by the window, looking out at the bay, unable to even face the wreckage he'd helped create. "She's all yours, Julian," I said. "Just a heads up, the house-sitting excuse is already taken. You might want to help her brainstorm a new one for the next guy." I walked out of that penthouse and didn't look back. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into a new life. When I stepped out into the rain, I didn't put up my hood. I let the cold water wash over me. That was 6 months ago. The divorce was the easiest part. When you have proof of a secret life, there isn't much to argue about. I didn't take the savings. I didn't take anything she touched. I moved to a different city, took a senior position at a firm that actually values my time, and started over.
Sometimes I wonder if she's still in that glass tower, or if Julian realized that a woman who can lie that well to her husband can lie just as well to a lover. But mostly, I don't think about her at all. I have a new routine now. No more Vittorios, no more anchors, just the quiet, steady work of building something real on a foundation that won't ever crumble. I lost a wife, but I found the one thing she never had, the truth. And honestly, the view from here is much better.